Yeah, thank you. I would like to start right away with a couple of disclaimers and an aphorism. Bear with me because that's how we do things in Greece, speeches. Disclaimer one, for those who might be perplexed with the similarity of my name to the guy organizing the conference, Yeroulanos is spelled with a Y, not a G. Yeroulanos with a Y is pronounced Yeroulanos all over the world, but Yeroulanos with a G is pronounced Geroulanos, Geroulanos, or Yeroulanos, depending on where you are. The only benefit of spelling Yeroulanos with a G in this case is to disguise any form of nepotism that might have led to my presence in this conference. Disclaimer number two. I'm not a scholar or an intellectual in any way. I'm a practitioner with experience in two different districts, Leicester West and Central Athens, three different parliaments, Greek, British, and the US, and the Municipal Council of Athens. Still, my views are local. I know Greek politics rather well, and Athens politics probably better, but I don't know if what I say here can in any way be projected to the rest of the world or Europe. And here for the aphorism. I never quite understand the use of the term social democrat. To me, it sounds a little bit like democratic republic. It's either verbose in countries that practice democracy or used as a euphemism in North Korea. In my view, there can never be a socialist who does not believe, preach, or practice democracy, at least not in my country, and I will explain why. But given these disclaimers and aphorisms, you're probably thinking this guy's in the wrong conference at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And you might be right. So instead of speaking on a subject I don't know in a place I shouldn't be, I decided to talk about something completely different. I decided to talk about love and trust. For without love and trust, we cannot have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And without a government of the people, by the people, for the people, we cannot have democracy. We cannot have socialism, and we can, I understand, not have social democracy. When my party, the Pan-Hellenic Socialist Movement, was formed in Greece, the founder, Andreas Papandreou, stated its mission in very clear terms. I think inspired by the Marxist rhetoric of the time, he simply wanted Greeks to be free. Free on three levels. Free of international influence. It was a time when the American assisted junta had fallen, but the influence of NATO and America was still very prominent in Greek politics. Free from social pressures, inequality was killing the middle and lower classes, and they had very limited bargaining power within government. And free to be who you aspire to be as a person, an individual, or a citizen. Individual rights were squandered, and government worked only for its friends. In other words, Andreas Papandreou wanted every Greek person to be free on a national, on a social, and on an individual level. That was his triptych, his political triptych, in fact. Seen through this point of view, I believe that the birth of PASOK in Greece was an act of love and trust. Love of and trust in the Greek people. Fundamental to being free at the time was the freedom to get together, pursue and shape freedom together. In his time, unions became strong, local government became more democratic, farmers strengthened the collective bargaining, and small and medium-sized enterprises were enjoying the support of the government. The welfare state provided security for all of this. People had a voice, and the government listened. A bond was formed, a bond built on mutual trust, at least for a little while. Was the socialist rule in Greece all roses? By no means. At times, unions became an arm of the government. Some collectives became very corrupted. Local government strength was not coupled with accountability, leading to various abuses of power. In practice, PASOK's original version of freedom was deeply skewed by the control of power and money, much of which was provided through EU subsidies. Come to think of it, power and money is the usual cause for divorces, but we'll keep this idea for later. But during its rule, the country never went broke. Inequality was kept at bay. Transition from a farming society to a post-industrial one took place rather smoothly. Education and healthcare became more accessible and universal. We actually joined the EU and the Euro. That was not all. We hosted the best Olympics of all times, won the European Championship against Portugal in Portugal. Sorry, Katrina. And PASOK's time in power is associated to this day with a good life for the so-called common people. I might be making light of the Olympics and the European Championship, but in 2004 was the year where all Greek people felt we could do no wrong. It's a social state of mind I believe every politician should strive for. Since I'm talking about love and my daughter and nephew are somewhere in the audience, let me just say that is also a worthy goal for parenting. Fast forward to today, and we are far, far, far away from all of that. After the conservative-led bankruptcy of the country is fully dependent on EU funds and its directives. Inequality in income, wealth, and more importantly in Greece, access to power has grown exponentially. Individuals are expected to fend for themselves. Any form of collective claim is looked down upon with disdain and almost considered unpatriotic in many ways. We're back in the 70s. In a social study we ran back in 2008, a year before the Conservatives fled the government, leaving the country bankrupt, Greek women and men already felt squandered under four overwhelming forces. We named them the pressure from below, from inside, from outside, and from above. The pressure from below, a new class of poverty, coupled with new waves of immigration. A pressure from inside, lack of rules and standards, competition rather than cooperation, breakdown of social networks, the feeling of being left on your own to fight both law in Greece and lawlessness. The pressure from outside, globalization, climate change, regional turmoil, the ever-trigger happy Balkans. Even the EU, for the first time since Greece joining, was seen as a force of instability. But it's the fourth pressure that really broke the Greeks. The pressure from above. Power. A small group of politicians, business people, and bankers, journalists, and some in the judiciary in cahoots deciding who makes it and who breaks. A ruling group so small and concentrated on their own interests that people disappeared from their sights, making all other forces at work even more unbearable. 50 years after the establishment of democracy in Greece, the re-establishment of democracy, 40 after PASOK took over, never have we seen so few wielding Greece so much power over so many. And then the crisis hit. Under the so-called Troika, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF, central government got more powerful in order to collect taxes and pay debt. An ailing and very uncompetitive banking sector was now made responsible not only for all investments, state, European, and private, but also for all bankruptcies. Big business was further favored over SMEs as tax-paying and efficient, two characteristics that I can refute quite strongly. The power of unions was curtailed, leaving people to negotiate salaries and working conditions on their own. Local government, controlled recently by conservative mayors, still quite bureaucratic and unaccountable, was limited to collecting garbage and organizing music festivals. Worse yet, democracy is shrinking in Greece. Laws are passed with very little discussion. Criticism is silenced. The press is coerced in supporting the government, and the courts are underperforming. To add insult to injury, the prime minister was caught eavesdropping on his adversaries, on his own ministers, on journalists, and army officials. The vision of being free in Greece, free of fear, need, want, and pressure, has never been more distant in people's minds. And the left? Where's the left? The left is in the woods, split in factions, exhausted of infighting, and separated from the people it represents. It is aimlessly looking for purpose. Until it defines a purpose, even the sum of the parts of the factions that we're now all in do not suffice to beat the conservative government. Why? Well, first, PASOK paid an early and high price for being in power when the crisis hit. It carried the burden and paid for it dearly. It actually coined the term PASOKification. PASOKification to me is the definition of a political institution that has broken the bonds of trust with the people it represents. Its voters have gone, some have gone to the left, some have gone to the right, but the big majority of people who voted for PASOK are now at home. In the past, how many? Since 2010, so 12 years, we have lost 2 million people from the voting booths. Yeah. And PASOK is the one party that's missing in the equation. And Syriza. What is keeping Syriza from becoming the new PASOK? Well, apart from adopting the language of the right, profits over people, competition over cooperation, big business over SMEs, efficiency over collectivism, free trade over fair trade, big government over local government, the latest self-leaning government of Syriza also adopted the practices of the right. A government of the few, by the few, for the few, just different few. Why? Two reasons. One is DNA. To be fair, Syriza is not a socialist or a social democratic party. Its roots are communist and rather revolutionary. So a government of, by, and for the people was never its aim. Building trust people could participate freely in shaping their own future was never its strength. It is no coincidence that Syriza is heavily underrepresented in local government, in unions, and in farmers' collectives. Two, they are terrified, as we all are, of the growing waves of populism and neo-fascism. The growth of populism and neo-fascism has left the left so terrified that we're all running in the wrong direction. Instead of addressing the causes of distrust, we're grappling only with the symptoms. I can tell you that when I ran for mayor of Athens and I went down on the streets, the only other party, let's say, that I met was Golden Dawn. There was no one else in the streets. We hear government is not to be trusted, period. We respond, people are not to be trusted, period. Impasse, period. We have slowly, steadily, and surely shut ourselves in a room far, far away, leaving trumps to prey on fears. At this point in my speech, it might sound even more bizarre to mention again the word love, a word used in divorce courts only in the past tense. But make no mistake, we're in divorce proceedings. And someone has to be the adult in the room. Someone has to say, I'm sorry. Someone has to say, I trust you first. And someone has to say, despite of all that happened, I still love you. And I'm willing to do everything that I can to win you over. Because here's what is at stake. If the left does not reclaim its bond with people, inequality will rise, distrust will grow, populists and neo-fascists will capitalize on the fear, and the left will be left buttressing the right against the far right. That is exactly where we were right before the Second World War. It is actually terrifying in its simplicity. If we don't sow love, we shall reap war. Now, I have to remind myself that I am in a university, and even for an American university, this language might be a little too touchy-feely, maybe simplistic. So let me propose the same idea in a theorem that might make more, shall I say, scientific sense. We shall fail to address inequality and the concentration of capital if we fail to address the concentration of power. Or to put it in positive terms, the only way to redistribute wealth fairly is to redistribute power democratically. An idea gaining ground with PASOK these days. Because today we have an unsustainable lack of parity between the responsibility laid on an individual and the power they have to meet that responsibility. We have asked people to fend for themselves, but we have not provided them the tools to do so. We have failed to provide basic security against the four pressures I mentioned before that are actually pressuring the Greek household. And while we have unprecedented power to democratize money, energy, and knowledge, the three basic building blocks of modern creativity, we're keeping them in the markets and allocate them to oligarchies who distribute them still at a very high cost. Economically, as well as socially and politically, this model is constantly accelerating the end result, and the end result is a free fall over a cliff. Why? Because any disparity between power and responsibility leaves people terrified and exhausted. And that's where we are right now. So what does it mean to give people power? It means to trust people so deeply as to gradually involve more and more people in collective decision-making processes through highly independent and powerful institutions who can actually be free to shape our future, our individual, collective, and national futures. Not only the obvious stakeholders, but anyone who feels they have a vested interest in decisions that can change people's lives. Like, in my country at least, giving people real saying in national laws passed and local government plans to be implemented. Like giving citizens of a region the capacity to determine land use and environmental preservation. Like giving alumni decision-making power over state universities, or local authorities the capacity to choose from a pool of capable school principals the capacity to choose from a pool of capable teachers, and teachers the choice to teach what they think is best for their children. Excuse me. For some in the audience, such ideas are already implemented in your countries. But I know many in my country will be terrified of them. Just like you would be terrified with ideas that give more power to people in your societies. Why? Primarily because we feel that power to the people will lead to resistance, and resistance will lead to delays. Resistance against change and progress, resistance against investment, even resistance against things that we value as socialists and social democrats. This fear might be well-founded and true in some cases in the short run. But, and this is my final word, if we hold strong, if we hold steady, if we say, I'm sorry, if we say, I trust you first, and I will do everything in my power to win you back, people will respond. How do I know this? Because they always do. And that is why we believed in people in the first place. That is exactly why we established democracies in the first place. And that is exactly why, my friends, my Socialist Party was founded in the first place. So here are my 2 cents of wisdom from the streets of Athens, a sum of all I talked about today. Social Democrats, please love people again. Thank you.